Hello, my name's Jade and today I'm going to be doing my 2021 wrap up. In this video I'm going to be talking about favourite books of 2021 as well as some other statistics and categories like my favourite covers of the year, going over the series I read this year, any authors that stood out to me, any disappointing books, things of that nature. So according to Goodreads, I read 32,505 words this year, 107 books. Can we just pause there for a second and talk about the fact that I read 107 books. 107. Over 100 by 7, but like 100 books. I can't remember off the top of my head how many books I read last year. I feel like it was 60 something and I really wanted to get to like 65 just so I could like round off the number. Like 50 books for so long was unachievable to me. Just insane. It's insane. Same year that I did my masters as well. I don't know if that helped or if I managed my time better. If I was stricter with myself. I was quite strict with how I was reading. Very exciting time. The shortest book I read was Galatea by Madeline Miller. This was the short story that she released this year. It was 20 pages long. The longest book I read was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas, which is 803 pages long. No one's surprised there. Apparently the average book length was 303 pages. The most popular book I read was Pride and Prejudice. Is that million or billion? I think that's million. 5,649,702 people read Pride and Prejudice this year. A lot of people. My least popular, again, not too surprising, Women Together, Women Apart by... Oh, I cannot read that font, that's too small. Is this one. Women Together, Women Apart, Portraits of Lesbian Paris by Tirza True Latmere. 96 people read this one, which I'm not surprised. It's very niche, it's very specific, it's very kind of academic. I read it for research for the novel that I'm writing. It was a really good read actually, it really helped. My average rating was 4.1. The star system stresses me out. I know like rating things out of 10 isn't that different to the star system, but there's something about the star system because things can be the same stars but you would have completely different reactions to them and different reasons for why you gave things. I don't know, I feel like I have more scope in the rating things out of 10 and you can like put something 0.5 and something 0.25 and it just, you get more options, I feel like. The highest rated book I read on Goodreads was Heartstopper Volume 4, the orange one, and that got an average of 4.69, so that did pretty well. The first book I read this year was The 100 Nights of Hero, and the last book was Water Runs Red by Jenna Claire. I did start a couple of books like towards the end though that I didn't finish. I started Venus and Aphrodite by Bethany Hughes. Also started Vanish Me, which is the third book in the Runaway Train trilogy by Lee Matthew Goldberg. I have an arc for that one. I haven't actually finished it yet as of filming this video. Shall we start by like talking about some like the big things I accomplished this year in terms of my reading? That sounds so weird, but I love talking about this stuff at the end of the year. I love talking about the series that I read and completed or started. I started Dune this year. I only read the first book. The 70 series I want to continue on with. I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought I would. I marathoned the Cursebreakers trilogy by Bridget Kammerer. ACOTAR, all of them. All of the ACOTAR books I read this year. That was such like a weight off my mind because I read Thrown a Glass last year and even that, like I knew I was behind and I was just sleeping on her that whole time. What was I doing? I also marathoned the King of Scars duology, the Nikolai duology, that's what it's called. I'm up to date on the Grishaverse and I read the two like companions, Lives of Saints and what's the other one called? Something Fairy Tales, Language of Thorns. I read Ninth House, which is the first book in a series, so technically, you know, Knife of Never Letting Go is the first book in a series. Oh, I read Find Me by Andre Aciman, which is a companion to Call Me By Your Name, and I had that on my shelf for a really long time and I finally got around to it. I also finally got around to Normal People, which had been on my shelf for a really long time, as well as Adele by Leela Slimani. All of these books are books where I read one of the author's other works in class, and so I went and bought a bunch of works that the authors did because I really enjoyed what I read in class. For instance, Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, Lullaby by Leela Slimani, and Call Me By Your Name by Andre Aciman. And so I got these like companions or, you know, other works from the author, wanting to read more from them, and then they sat on my shelf for so long, and this was the year that I read like all three of them. Pat on the back to Jade. Fun fact, I also read The Hate You Give in that class, and I have yet to read anything else by Angie Thomas. I need to get on that. Maybe that should be something I should do next year. Similarly, I read The Girls by Emma Cline in that class, which I adored. She has a short story collection out, which I really want to read. It's called Daddy. It's supposed to be really uncomfortable and thought-provoking, and just, I'm all about it. I really want to read that one. So hopefully I get to that one this year too. And then the last big series that I read this year was Skullduggery Pleasant. I reread the whole thing, and I mean, I talked about this in every single one of my wrap-ups. You're probably sick of hearing me saying it. Originally, I'd only got to book 7, and I read The Maleficent 7, which I don't know if you can see, it's over here, and then I stopped. So I reread them from the very beginning, including all of the short stories, making sure that I read the short stories in order of when they come out, although I think the order in here is actually wrong. So I didn't technically read them in the correct order because I read it in the order this thing told me to. As well as Apocalypse Kings, which actually came out this year, but it does take place during phase 1. And then I got to read the last 2, and actually, spoilers, it's like a week into January and I've already read Skullduggery Resurrection, which is part of phase 2, and I'm so excited to continue on with this story, these characters. I'm so glad that I finally made myself because I've been meaning to do it forever. Like, I wanted to reread them and I wanted to get to the end because this was my favorite series as a kid. It continues to be one of my favorite series. I had so much fun, and it's so nice knowing what happens and being able to continue on, because I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to continue on with them. I just kind of wanted that peace. And then as I started reading, I was like, there's no way I'm not going to want to continue on with them, and I don't. I want to keep going. Some authors that really stood out to me this year, for a couple authors, I read a lot of their work. Sarah J Maas, obviously, I had only read Throne of Glass by her, and this was the year that I kind of feel like I caught up. I haven't read her DC book, but I don't know if I'm ever going to. Leigh Bardugo, same situation. I felt behind, so it just, you know, I feel up to date. Taylor Jenkins Reid, I read 3 of her books this year. I read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Daisy Jones and the Six, and Malibu Rising, which are all kind of in the same universe, if you will. It's gonna be a quartet. The Evidence of the Affair is also in that world, and I read that one. I really enjoyed that one too. I ordered all of them. They were all great. Starless Sea, I finally got around to reading The Starless Sea. I mean, this isn't like a big author shout out because I only read one book by her, but I read Night Circus 3, maybe 4 years ago. I read it in my second year of my undergrad, and I just last year graduated from my master's, so at least 2 to 3 years ago. And I'd been meaning to read it ever since it came out. Ever since I heard of it, I was really excited for The Starless Sea. It sat on my shelf year after year. I think I was really intimidated by it. Finally made myself read it, and it was glorious. I want to also talk a little bit about Natalie Haynes. I didn't read a ton of her work. I read Pandora's Jar, which is a non-fiction book about Greek myth that she brought out, as well as The Children of Jocasta, and I really enjoyed both. And what happened was, upon reading Pandora's Jar, I learned more about her, like researched her. She is a host of things. She's a broadcaster, she's a comedian, also a classicist, and she combines humor and classicist studies, wow, antiquity studies a lot. There's a thing that you can find a lot of her doing on YouTube, and I just became obsessed. If we want to talk about graphic novels, I did marathon the Heartstopper graphic novel series, which I really enjoyed. Giant Days also feels like it made a really big, it's right here, I'm like pointing and you can't see it. I've read the first 9 volumes of Giant Days, which is a lot. I also started trying to read poetry. I've not found anything that I'm obsessed with yet, but I'm gonna keep trying. Yeah, I think that's all the things that I want to kind of wrap up on. Should we get into like the favorites section? Shall we start with the most disappointing reads of the year? It's kind of a bummer. Let's start with that, get out of the way. Normally I don't like to include this section, but there were a couple that stood out this year. The Knife of Never Letting Go. I enjoyed this book. I'm going to read the second book. I have it on my shelf. I will read it at some point. I think there was a lot of potential for something to be really cool, and I think I went in thinking it was going to be something that it wasn't. The tone was just way off from what I expected it to be. I don't fully remember why I was frustrated, other than there's a big plot point that I was really angry about. I just know that I was quite frustrated, and the more I thought about it, the more conflicted and confused I got. On a similar-ish vein is This Is Not the Jess Show, which I read earlier this year, and I think this is probably, if I had to pick a least favorite book of the year, it's probably this one. I was just really frustrated by it, not like the direction it went in. Again, it had the potential to be something really cool, and it's just one of those things where it's not for me. What happened wasn't for me, and I don't think it was done particularly well. It's hard when you have in your mind what something could be and it doesn't do that. You're like, but why didn't you do this? It could have been so much better. But that was the author's story to tell, so it's fine. It's just the most unsatisfying. Like, normally there's nothing that like jumps out at me so clearly, and that one jumped out at me. I have a list of top 10 books, including novels and non-fiction, and then I have a favourite graphic novel and a favourite poetry collection. My favourite poetry that I read this year was Sappho, specifically this edition translated by Mary Barnard. I did also read a different translation because I got that obsessed, but I just loved reading this collection. I think I did it in a day. So excited to research more about Sappho because I definitely want to learn more about her life. I've really enjoyed that. 10 out of 10. My favourite graphic novel, which is actually the first book I read this year, is The 100 Nights of Hero. I loved the concept, the telling of the stories each night and how stories linked to what was happening and the way the overall story played out, and all of the stories were so beautiful and interesting and unique and quirky and is funny and charming and weird. I just really enjoyed it. I'm gonna quickly go through some honourable mentions because there are a lot of books this year that I really enjoyed. My favourites list has like a couple at the end that are like all-time favourites now, and then a lot of books that I just really liked, a lot of like 9s out of 10s that I was really impressed by, and there are some that were so close to making the list. These are also mostly like 9s out of 10s that I really enjoyed and really respected. We have Beautiful World, Where Are You by Sally Rooney. I really enjoyed that one. It was really thought-provoking, really well done. It just doesn't jump out of my mind particularly strongly. Malibu Rising and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I really enjoyed both of them. I think those two are kind of equal. So originally I think I said I preferred Malibu Rising, but I don't know if I actually do. I think they're both really clever, and the way they weave stories together is just mwah, mwah. The Children of Jocasta by Natalie Haynes. Again, initially upon reading this I was kind of conflicted as to what I thought, but then I sat down and I like wrote a little review type thing to think about it, and I was going back and forth and it made me think about so many different things. And I think if nothing else, the fact that I sat there and had such a thought-provoking session, if you will, is a good sign. There's also two classics I ended up really enjoying. Lita by Vladimir Nabokov and Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Great, really enjoyed both of them. Wasn't expecting to. Definitely really glad that I read them. And then this is the one that I don't know how highly I rated it upon reading it, because I do have some frustrations with this one. This one is the one that kind of is the lowest I think on this list in terms of like critical opinion and how well I thought it was done and such. Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. But I can't stop thinking about it. I just want to go back to that world. I don't know when the second book's come out. I don't think anyone knows. Yeah, I need the next one. This list is not in any particular order until we get to the end. So I've kind of put it in an order, but don't think of it as like a hard and fast order. This is like roughly, if I had to guess, maybe this. So at number 10 we have The Dying of the Light by Skullduggery Pleasant, the last book in the Skullduggery series, well at least phase 1. I think it's my favourite of the series. 8 and 9 are really close in my opinion. I really enjoyed both of them. To me they both felt like a step above. I don't know if it's because I was reading these two for the first time, whereas I'd already read all the other ones before, if that made it more exciting to me maybe. That's what I felt. They felt like they were a step above the rest. I really enjoyed them. They were really complex and interesting. What more is there to say? I'm so glad to have finished it. It's a really satisfying last book in my opinion, and it's hard to wrap up a 9-book series. So kudos to Dirk Landy. Number 9 we have one of the non-fiction books, and that is John Green, The Anthropocene Reviewed. I just had a blast. I listened to the audiobook, so John was reading me these essays and they were really interesting and really random. They often related back about him, so he's like said it's the closest thing to like a memoir he'd ever write. Really enjoyed that aspect, and I just learned loads of like little random facts. He has this way of like writing about humanity that's so hopeful and optimistic, and I love it. It's just a really interesting, unique book, and I really enjoyed it. Number 8 we have All of You, Every Single One by Beatrice Hitchman. I enjoyed Petite Mort, but it didn't like speak to my soul, and this spoke to my soul, and that's the biggest reason why it's on this list. Like I do also think it was really beautifully written. The characters were all so complex and they felt so real, and the way story flitted across time was so beautifully done. The ending, I still don't know what to make of the ending, but other than like me not knowing how I feel about the ending, that's the only like hard and fast critique I could give it. Really, it just spoke to me and I really loved this one. Number 7 we have The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. This is set in ancient Pompeii, and it really brought ancient Pompeii to life. I just loved being in this setting. It was also real and vivid. Like I could always smell the smells and feel the sun, and loved that experience. The story's really complex. You never quite know where it's going. It's set in a brothel, but that's all you have. Like you're just following the characters. There's more like a character study, and the characters are really interesting and the relationships are really complex and really interesting. That's what it's all about, really. And I keep thinking about it, and I'm so excited for the next one. And then is this number 6? Yeah, 6 is House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. I was just blown away by this. I thought for a first book it was really strong. I had one or two little nitpicky things that just stopped it from being like an all-time favourite, but it was close. I really enjoyed this. I'm so excited to read the next one and to go deeper into the series. The characters were amazing. The world is so rich and interesting and unlike anything she's ever written. Very promising. Really enjoyed this one. And the next up, number 5? Yes. We have Dune by Frank Herbert. Who knew? Who knew this was going to be on my favourites list? Not me. I was expecting to like kind of enjoy it, but mostly I was just in it for the film. And who knew that when all was said was done, this film that I was so excited about, I kind of think the book was better than the film. So wow, what a curveball. I was expecting it to be really dense and heavy and difficult to read, and it is like sci-fi and a lot of people get really confused. I didn't have that. I didn't really get that confused at any point. I was able to figure things out relatively easily. The things that I didn't have figured out, like I was fine with the pacing, but I don't think it's the strongest. I never got bored. There would be very small lapses. I was always entertained and I was always excited to see what happened next. It raises a lot of really interesting questions. It sets up for a really interesting story, I think, and I'm gonna be reading the second one. Wow, look at that. And so this is the top 4. These are going to be going on to my all-time favourites list. These all got 10 out of 10s. I think at number 4 we're going to go with another non-fiction, which is Natalie Haynes' Pandora's Jar. It tells the story kind of 10 ancient Greek Top 3. My camera just turned off. Great timing. I have ordered these, but again, I love all 3 of these. All of these are 10 out of 10s in my opinion. So is Pandora's Jar. It just feels different because it's non-fiction. I don't have the attachment to it in the same way that I have to these 3. But at number 3 is Normal People by Sally Rooney. Again, this had been sitting on my shelf for so long and I hadn't gotten around to it. I read it because of a class. I just loved learning about Connell's and Marianne's story. Loved the TV show. The TV show was as good in my opinion, which is so rare for that to happen. I don't know what else to say. I think it's a beautiful, beautiful story. Sally Rooney, she's a very gifted woman. She has a way of writing the words that is just amazing. And then at number 2, these top 2 I feel like are really hard because both of these really like jumped out at me. Like I immediately within the first chunk of pages I knew we had something special, whereas like Normal People I did really love, but it took me a little while to warm up to. And number 2 is something I read quite early on in the year, and that's Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Obviously my favourite of the 3 of hers I've read. The audiobook was phenomenal. It's full cast. If you haven't read this yet, listen to the audiobook when you do. It's about a band in the 60s and we're learning about their story, how they came to be and how they fell through a series of interviews that are all kind of interwoven. I love looking at like behind the scenes of bands and stuff like that. Bohemian Rhapsody is one of my favourite films, so that might be one of the reasons why this is so high on my list. I also just love the character work and the topics and relationships. There was so much raw emotion. I think there were 1 or 2 times in which I was a little bit underwhelmed, but I don't care. I don't care. I love it. 10 out of 10. It's amazing. Everyone should read it. I can't say any more than that. And then number 1, that is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. Just love the story. I love the world and the concept, and her writing's really atmospheric, so me, at least when I read her books, I'm completely transported there to these places, and there's so many like little motifs and smells and sights and sounds that like when I think of this book I think of cocktails and bees and honey and spices and books and dust and cats and candles and like so many other little things like that. And the Night Circus is the same. Her writing is really beautiful. Her characters are always really rich and they feel like real people, and they're complex, they're flawed. This is just such a unique idea. It's kind of like a mystery aspect in the way that you're slowly trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and I loved that. There are like 1 or 2 things I'm a little bit confused by still, but that's okay. Not everything has to make complete sense, and maybe one day I'll reread it and I'll understand. I just really loved it. I don't know what else to say other than that. It's spoke to me. Oh, favourite covers is really important that we talk about this. It's one of my favourite things to talk about. Starless Sea. This edition in particular is the Waterstones exclusive edition. And apart from the fact that there's like the sticker mark here that I like need to clean off somehow, this cover is beautiful. It is different from the normal UK cover, I think. The back I really think is beautiful. The spine is gorgeous. End pages are beautiful. And then naked It is also gorgeous. And I also, in a Lumicrate, got some, what are they called? You know the things that you stick into your books? Like that, can you see it? And they're really gorgeous, so I stuck a couple of those in there. Oh, it's got this on the pages. It's just a gorgeous book. I really love the cover of Pandora's Jar as well. I think this illustration is just really unique, and I love the way we have these like splattered foiling, partially stars, also kind of like freckles, just like splattering. I really like the cover for the Wolf Den. Not the biggest fan of orange as a color, but I think it really works here. I love the little figures of these women and the stars, and there's a moon over here. I think it's a really cool concept, and I just really like looking at it. House of Earth and Blood also has a really cool cover. Oh, the Nikolai duology by Leigh Bardugo, particularly Rule of Wolves, is really pretty. It's this really like nice red color underneath, and the end pages for that one are gorgeous. The paper is like this pearlescent paper. It's very nice. Yeah, I think that's all for my 2021 wrap up. Please let me know in the comments down below what your favorite books of 2021 were. How many books did you read this year? Did you meet your goals? But other than that, that's all from me. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!